everybody, welcome to Dackman Productions and welcome to Conrail. And so for this video, I have viewers who like when I talk about interesting stories about different things. And so today I'm going to talk about an interesting story, something I don't own and really don't plan on owning anytime soon. So I ran across information that Lionel had released a Conrail GenSet locomotive. And so I'm like, I looked at it, I looked at the road number, researched it, and found that the road number actually had an interesting story behind it that Lionel had picked. And so I was like, wow, this, between the combination that I'm going to talk about the Lionel Genset, the GenSet switcher itself, its history, who made it, and we'll get into the design behind it, the mechanicals a little bit. Then we'll talk about the Lionel Conrail version, and I thought the combination of all that would make for a great, interesting story. So a little bit about myself, when I do these reviews on the mechanical side, I'm a diesel technician, have been since 1988, and no, I don't work on those little toy diesel pickup trucks. I work on the big stuff. The GenSet locomotive itself is either a love or hate locomotive, filled with a little bit of controversy behind it, and the design. For me, it was something that looked good on paper. However, to put it in action, it was it didn't turn out as well. However, there are some railroads out there that still use them successfully. Me personally, I'm just not a fan of them at all. And lastly, did Conrail really have a GenSet switcher at all? But at any rate, let's get into all this in a video. Lionel offered the GenSet locomotive in two different product lines, the Vision line and the Legacy version. So let's first talk about the Vision line. The Vision line had 3 independently operating engines, simulated sleep technology. The simulated mode shuts down all idling engine sounds after a set period of inactivity, just like the real engine. The die-cast Union Pacific GenSet switcher also had a full detailed interior. Opening compartment doors reveal hidden details. Superior level of realistic body detail and separately applied metal parts. Realistic open vents, opening and closing exhaust stack covers, synchronized with smoke exhaust output. Decorated cab interior with enhanced panel detail. Enhanced realistic lighting in cab interior. Directional lighting including dual LED headlights on front and rear. Oscillating ditch lights on the front, illuminated number boards, ground lights on the sides, die-cast body, die-cast metal trucks, pallet, and fuel tank metal frame. So these things were pretty heavy. And because they had a fully detailed cab interior, these were only had one powered motor, which was on the rear. There were only 2 road names made in the Vision line, the Union Pacific and the Norfolk Southern. However, Lionel did make a big mistake with the Norfolk Southern, and the horse is facing the wrong direction on both sides. Here in this photo, you can see 3 different smoke units operating. The covers on top of the exhaust really open, and we'll talk about the real GenSet and why it had 3 exhaust stacks here a little bit later in this video. We will get into the prototypical version, but I wanted to show you a picture here that the Lionel version really does
work just like the real thing on the Vision line. So let's move on to the legacy. The Lionel Genset switcher was eventually downgraded to legacy, but still seemed to have all the same features and metal construction. However, even within the last couple years, the Genset switcher received a totally redesigned plastic body with added weights. So it did change again. So let's talk about the prototypical version of the GenSet. The NRE 3GS21B is a low emissions diesel GenSet locomotive built by National Railway Equipment (NRE). Instead of using a single prime mover, the NRE GenSet locomotive is powered by three separate 700 horsepower Cummins QSK 19C engines, providing a total output horsepower of 2,100. Each engine could be individually started or shut off depending on the load, reducing overall emissions and improving fuel efficiency. At least that's how it looked on paper anyway. And by the way, I'm very familiar with Cummins. I'm a Cummins certified myself. So the Cummins QSK is a actual series of generators that Cummins has. It's a product line of generators. So anything that says or has the letters QSK, that's Cummins generator model lineup. At any rate, moving on. More than 150 of the 3GS21B genset locomotives have been produced to date, and a majority of these being manufactured at NRE's Mount Vernon shops in southern Illinois. And in addition to 3 road slug models have been produced as well. So let's take a look at the railroads that actually own these, because I know people will be interested. Okay, Dak, man, what railroads actually own these things? So, okay, let's look at those. Let's begin with BNSF Railway, bought 72 of them. California Northern Railroad bought 5. Canadian Pacific bought 2. CSX bought 16. Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority bought 2. Metro Stevedore bought 1. Neptune Bulk Terminals bought 3. Norfolk Southern bought 2. Nova Chemicals bought 2. National Railway Equipment had 7 demonstrator units. Pacific Harbor Line bought 4. Tacoma Rail bought 1. Union Pacific bought 59. The United States Army bought 7. San Diego and Imperial Valley Railroad bought 2. While the design may have looked good on paper, it definitely did not do well in the real world. There were a couple disadvantages to this particular locomotive. It had a more complex design, greater capital cost, greater dead weight. It had engines and generators that did not use standard parts. It used multiple smaller engines and lacked the hardiness of a single large railroad prime mover. And they were slow to get a cut of cars moving. Now, the GenSet locomotive itself is kind of controversial because some liked them and some didn't. I guess it all depended. And there was quite a few complaints, and some really liked them. So the GenSets were designed around the concept of power on demand with few emissions. And under the hoods were multiple engines, and usually 2 or 3. Union Pacific number 2005 debuted at City of Industrial, California, February 1st, 2006, and contracts were shortly issued after for 60 production gensets for Los Angeles. And other railroads stepped up to order these things right away as well, thinking that they were pretty much the future. Uh, the idea was greatly looked on because the locomotive saved fuel, wear and tear, noise, and pollution. Should one of the onboard engines fail, the remaining operable ones can continue to work. Repairing a genset locomotive uh, could be quickly removed and or an operable engine slid into place. So there were a few things that they did to try and make it pretty much a serviceable locomotive. And at the start, they were quite successful. I notice I said it at the start. And unfortunately, the railroads were so confident about the design, and due to rush to acquisition, some mechanical engineers felt the period was extremely short. Deliveries begun the first part of 2007, which set the stage for reliability problems in our early units that soured many railroaders. Some railroaders liked them, most didn't. And 2023, the GenSet concept is, for a variety of reasons, not too many are looking at that. For any reasons from reliability of the earliest models to increased maintenance expenses, they have been removed from many rosters. There are operators, however, mostly short lines and industrials, which find well kept gensets an asset. Some short lines utilizing nothing but gensets. So the biggest debate about the genset locomotive, mechanically speaking, is the fact that it used three diesel engines. Now there are other locomotives out there that use multiple engines, such as the E6, E7, E8. That had two engines in it. You had the DD35, DD40. So multiple engines is not an uncommon thing, but you typically went out there and you started all the both engines up and you were good for the day. However, this was designed differently. So you would start one engine, which would be the main engine, to move some cars around, and then as the power demand got greater, another engine was supposed to kick in and start. And if the demand for power was even greater, a third engine or the final engine was supposed to start up and kick in to give it the final 21 horsepower. And when you were done, as the load reduced, then the engines would start shutting down to save fuel. However, this is why it was so slow to get a cut of cars moving, because it had to get that load demand before it would kick an engine in. It was just too much of a delay, too much of a lag for it to work that way. But at any rate, some people are even saying that the company probably would have been better off if they would have designed a 12-cylinder or 16-cylinder single engine and made it a multi-displacement engine. And I know people are wondering, what is a multi-displacement engine? So a good example of a multi-displacement engine is the Dodge 5.7 Hemi engine. The Dodge 5.7 Hemi engine could be found in cars like the Challenger, Charger, Durango. Very common engine, and it's a multi-displacement engine, meaning it has 8 cylinders under power, but once you get out on the highway, uh, under not so much a load, it goes from 8 cylinder to 4 cylinder. So basically, it drops down from a 5.7 to a 2.8, basically. So you're cutting it in half. And that was so it could get better fuel economy. That was the good example of a multi displacement engine. And on another note, some garages didn't even think that was a great idea, because the 5.7 Hemi with the multi-displacement technology does suffer from cam issues. There's a controversy about that in itself. Some garages believe it is the multi-displacement technology which causes the cam failure. Some even recommending that you delete it. Some other garages disagree and say it's because people don't change their oil often enough, use the incorrect oil, so forth and so on. So there's even controversy about that design. However, do I agree that it would have been a better technology to take a 12-cylinder or 16-cylinder locomotive engine and make a multi-displacement engine out of it for switching? I don't know if it would work for that application, quite honestly, even as a diesel mechanic. Now, multi-displacement engines is not really a new technology, but Cadillac actually tried to develop the very first multi-displacement engine and introduced it in 1981, known as the Cadillac 468. So the Cadillac 468 would reduce the cylinders from 8-cylinder down to 6-cylinder down to 4 cylinders. However, the way they designed and how the engine was going to do this was way out in left field and was a big, huge disaster. So what had happened is Cadillac was using solenoids to deactivate the rocket arms and allowing the rocket arms to free float in order to go from 8-cylinder to 6-cylinder down to a 4-cylinder. Unfortunately, a lot of people, which not is it's pretty sad. It's not funny, but a lot of people had problems. A few people even lost their lives because when they went to hit the accelerator, they thought they had 8 cylinders, but it wouldn't come out of 4 or 6, and they got in accidents and got killed, or trying to get on off ramps or on ramps, and so people actually sued Cadillac over this design. It was horrible, but that's for another video, another YouTube channel. So let's move back onto the trains. So one of the road names that Lionel did offer on the GenSet locomotives over the production years of it was Conrail. And so looking at this, if you know the list that I read off, you would know that this is a total fantasy piece. We all know that. The GenSet was made way after the Conrail years. But the main reason why I'm doing this video is because there's a very, very interesting story behind the road number that Lionel decided to pick out, which is 4099. So let's look at that. Let's look at the interesting history about the road number of 4099. Conrail number 2040 was originally a GE U23B. Now, it was later rebuilt as a B23-7SS, and the power trucks were swapped out with EMD versions. What I'm not sure of if it was done during the Conrail time period or whether it was done during the Norfolk Southern time period. Now, when Norfolk Southern got the locomotive, they renumbered it to 4099. And also, they painted over the Conrail logos and anything that said Conrail on it in blue. So now the locomotive is all blue with a patched out Norfolk Southern road number of 4099. And if you look in this picture, you can see where that was done. Norfolk Southern eventually sold 4099 in the early 2000s to Ohio Central. So when Ohio Central owned number 4099, someone snuck onto the railroad property and actually painted a can opener logo, more likely for picture opportunities. So even in this case, This locomotive, the real one, is even a fantasy piece since the paint job was actually done by a vandal and not the railroad itself. Number 4099 would be sold again to Genesee and Wyoming Railroad. Unfortunately, it ended up on the chopping block due to a lawsuit between Genesee and Wyoming and with the EPA. Genesee and Wyoming lost this lawsuit and will have to scrap, or probably already did scrap, number 4099 by now. But I found this a pretty interesting story behind 4099, the number itself. So I just wanted to have a little general chat about the genset switchers since it was a picture of a Lionel Genset switcher, and then talk about the road number 4099 in itself. So I just thought this would make a cool video. I hope you enjoyed the technical and mechanicals behind it all from a diesel guy or diesel mechanic. And we'll catch you guys trackside. Goodbye.